All right, welcome to the Humans of Grappling podcast. We're here this week with Chad Lyman, Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt, law enforcement officer, and trainer, overall badass. So, yeah, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Whenever I'm in cross-sides bottom with you, though, or maybe half guard
Uh,
bottom, I don't feel like such a
uh,
badass. I'm gonna let you know.
okay.
When I got
Thank you.
the mic
I
pressure on
appreciate.
top of me, it's
I
game changing.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So, just to kind of explain the situation a little bit, you're stuck in Portland because of some crazy snowstorms, and you're kind of at an airport. So, if we hear like announcements or anything like that, we shouldn't be too the listeners shouldn't be too distracted. So
100%. Yeah.
awesome,
Yep. Thank you.
sweet, yeah. Thanks for coming on. Yeah, I'm really interested in like what you're doing with Leos and how you're able to train them in like police jujitsu. And I guess why don't you just start there and like how did you come up with that idea?
Cool. In
Yeah.
1998, I started as a police officer in Portland, Oregon, which is where I'm currently
Hmm.
stuck.
Gotcha.
Uh, Started to work for the Portland Police Bureau. I worked until 2004. Late in 1998,
Mm-hmm.
within my first year on the job, I
Mm-hmm.
realized that while I was willing to put my hands on people when needed or try to grab them or arrest them or whatever, I
Uh-huh.
realized I didn't have a cognitive way to do that. Similar, and what I went back to, because I didn't have a martial arts background, is my athletic days playing sports,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew
Mm-hmm.
intuitively that I'm an average athlete, but I overachieve because I work really
Mm.
hard and I'm really coachable and I can conceptualize things. So
Sure.
I started looking for a training methodology that then I could deploy at work when I was on police calls. And remember, this is like in '98. Like jujitsu is not
Right.
very common in general.
Yep.
Um, so nobody in police departments was doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And
Mm-hmm.
I tried taekwondo, lots of kicking and moving around, not a lot of control of other people. Wasn't my thing, so I passed on that. There was an American karate school in Beaverton, Oregon. I don't know the name of it to this day, but I walked in there and they were pretty hardcore, but they were kicking everybody
Mm.
in the junk and trying to throat punch each
Mm.
other. And I would say, well, what if
I
the guy
see.
doesn't want to turn around for me? And they'd be like, you'll Spartan kick him, you
Uh-huh.
know? It's almost like Master Ken, like
Sure.
stomp the groin, re-stomp the groin.
Uh-huh.
And I was like,
Right.
I can't really just stomp the groin. Like there's,
Uh-huh.
and it was funny, even in that setting, Mike, because some
Yeah.
of your listeners may think of what's a good martial art for self-defense. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of training or self-defense type, I'm not the sport guy. They'll sell it
Mm-hmm.
as there's no rules in the street. Well, the reality is there's
Sure.
a lot of rules in the street. It's called the
Mm-hmm.
law. Like you
Right.
can't randomly
Yeah.
stomp people's groins. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can't just throat punch people because
Right.
you parked in their spot. So,
Sure.
and then
Yeah.
you take a law enforcement officer, there's even more rules. So Krav Maga, karate. If 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 a Leo does that or a civilian, I'm not crapping on what they're doing, but for me that wasn't the right
Mm-hmm.
answer.
I
So I
see.
wandered into Straight Blast Gym, world headquarters,
Oh, okay.
which is in
Awesome.
Portland.
Wow.
And at that time, we weren't even doing gi jiu-jitsu. I know you're a fan of no gi through 10th Planet, but
Yep.
in the state of Oregon, the highest level belt in the gi was a blue belt in the whole state, and that happened to
Oh,
be at
wow.
that gym.
Uh-huh.
And Rob Follis and Matt Thornton were leading the team at that gym. And
Awesome.
uh, immediately I knew I was in the right place. I was getting controlled, held down by smaller people. It was very
Mm-hmm.
versatile. There
Mm-hmm.
was striking, which is necessary
Sure.
potentially for
Yeah.
self defense or for Leos, but there was a lot
For
of
sure.
control. And that's what caught
Right.
my eye. In the Taekwondo setting, there was no control. I felt like, well, I'm never going to
Mm-hmm.
control anybody. I'm going to kick them. They're going to kick me back. And
Right.
there's no way to handcuff a guy while I'm kicking him.
Sure.
The karate thing, they wanted to kill everybody. And then now I had
Mm.
this thing where I'm going to get in a position to kill you, but
Yeah.
maybe I don't kill you. And maybe you
Sure.
comply. And that was part of
Mm-hmm.
the training. So immediately it rang
Mm.
true to me. So by 1999, I was trying to get cops to train that early,
Oh wow.
and
Yeah.
nobody would do it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. They just think it's karate, or they just think it's like they just equate it to
Yeah,
these other like restomping the groin kind of
yeah.
things.
Now, what was interesting is in those early days, I would go to the gym and learn from Matt Thornton, Rob Follis, who's passed on now, but was a great guy, one of my best
Yeah.
friends. Dennis Davis, who's a coach at Xtreme Couture, was on the team as
Mm.
a fighter, as an AMI, and
Oh
then a
wow.
pro. So I knew Dennis
Oh
when
dang.
Dennis was not Dennis. You
Oh.
know, and he was coming up as a fighter. So I was rubbing shoulders with all those guys back in the day, and I
Right.
would go to train with them, and then I would go to work, and we would lay out tumbling mats in the hallway outside the locker room, and I would show
Mm-hmm.
the other cops stuff that I
Oh
was
wow.
doing in the gym. And at
Mm-hmm.
first, no one wanted to do it with me, but then they saw me and my partner drilling, and then they saw us on calls controlling people, and then it
Mm-hmm.
made everyone else. Slowly, our little group in the hallway grew to a larger group, and people would literally have to step over us to go into the locker room and get changed out. And
Awesome.
eventually, the Portland Police Bureau built a mat room in what is now their North Precinct. It used to be called Northeast when I was there. They built a
Uh-huh.
mat room literally because my friends and I trained so much in the hall that we kept putting holes in the wall, and the captain got
Uh,
mad and built a mat room.
yeah.
And
Oh.
that precinct was the only precinct in the entire city that had a mat room, and that was because me and my
Wow.
friends in the early
Mm.
2000s were already doing this before it was cool. Now, fast forward to today, I moved to Vegas in '04, and then
Mm.
fast forward to modern police um, evolution in tactics,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and especially even as we see some landmark cases that bring a lot of attention, like
Mm.
George Floyd being one.
Sure. Yep.
Post George Floyd, there's a bigger push than ever for control type training. And really, before that, before COVID, it was picking up, and then COVID put a little bit of a chill on it. Then George
Sure.
Floyd put a chill on anything law enforcement related for a little while because people were understandably upset. And
Right.
then, but the rebound from that for a guy like me who's been trying since 1998 to get departments to adopt more training, regular training, and more grappling training,
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen it better. I'm stranded in Portland
That's awesome.
because I
Yeah.
was flown up by a department in southern Washington to provide
Mm-hmm.
training. I used to provide training, Mike, and I would get 3 cops, 4 cops, five
Uh-huh.
cops. You know, we had 40
Right.
plus cops in the room,
That's awesome.
3/4 of which trained jujitsu out of that room.
Oh.
One
Oh
quarter was
wow.
brand
So.
new.
Uh-huh.
Most white and blue belts, several purple
Uh-huh.
belts, and a few black
Mm.
belts.
Dang.
So it's changing.
That's a solid squad. Yeah.
It's changing.
And that yeah, that's I'm sure they like, since there was a majority of like jujitsu guys there, like that's probably why like that influenced them to like bring you up and like to get everyone bought in,
Yeah.
probably
Yes,
too.
sir.
That helps.
It helps a
Yeah.
lot. And one of the things I've done is similar to your jiu-jitsu journey. Jiu-jitsu is a very monotonous, day by day, step by step journey. Some days better than others. Like there's a philosophy of 1% better every day. If I got 1% better every day, I'd be amazing. No one would
Oh
ever
yeah,
beat me.
definitely.
There's days I'm
Yeah.
worse, but it's
Mm.
not important on getting one. I want to try to get better every day, but that's the
Sure.
key: is consistently
Mm.
striving, struggling,
Yep.
and that's what jiu-jitsu teaches you in general, right? So
Yep.
once I went down this journey, just like I'm not deterred when my jiu-jitsu journey takes a long time or has ebbs and flows. I felt the same way with law enforcement in creating this
Mm.
change within my own industry, and I've stayed
Mm-hmm.
with it over time. Um,
Yep.
I was given classes in this area of the U.S. in 2006, and I would get 8 guys.
Wow.
I would get 7
Uh-huh.
guys. Um,
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, and it's not unusual. I have over 50 affiliated academies around the U.S. who teach police
Wow.
jiu-jitsu,
Uh-huh.
a grappling-based control system for law enforcement, and I
Mm-hmm.
have 8 in Canada. and I teach coast to coast now. And on my personal training cadre, I've got about 30 guys who work as adjuncts for me that are black belts that are also police officers. So it's growing.
Oh, dang. Yeah.
It's growing.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, like you, yeah, you chipping away at it for, yeah, well over a decade,
Yeah.
15 years even, like that's amazing. So yeah, that definitely, that's super important because yeah, like you don't, like police officers are going to put their hands on somebody. Like it's just a matter of time, and it's just whether they are comfortable doing that or not, and like whether they are like well versed in that or not. Like it would is that like a fair assessment of like
Very much,
like
very
yeah,
much.
yeah,
And one of the things I teach police administrators or even lay people like you're giving me this platform today, I'm so grateful.
sure,
One of the biggest reasons for an overuse of force is an initial underuse of force or inefficient low level force. So what I
sure,
mean by that is if I reach out and I try to control your arm, you're a guy that I'm going to
yeah,
try to guide off to the side. You're causing a
uh-huh,
disturbance. I need to talk
sure,
to you. I'm going to separate
yeah,
you from maybe not you, but maybe there's a man arguing with a woman and it's downtown at the strip. Common
yeah,
story, right? And I'm
sure,
gonna
yeah,
move him away from her, try to de-escalate, calm everyone down. And he pulls
yeah,
his arm away from me and kind of bucks
uh-huh,
up on me
uh-huh,
because of my experience in the room with dudes like you, guys like you.
yeah, sure,
Um, I'm not. I'm going to follow up with another low level technique as opposed to going
mm,
right into okay, well that didn't work, so now I'm going to Donkey
yeah,
Kong this guy. Well, no, I'm going to
sure,
start.
yeah,
I'm going to start applying the next thing and the next thing, and because I have multiple options with my hands,
mm-hmm,
um,
yeah,
I'm primarily going to stay with my hands. Now,
mm-hmm,
that's not the reason. This just came up, and this kind of leads, in my mind, into a good conversation on why jujitsu might be a superior LEO system or even self-defense system than some
mm-hmm,
other systems. And
mm,
somebody told me recently in a conversation, well, it's because it's more camera friendly and it's nicer. And I said,
mm,
that's true, but that's not why I do it. That's not why I'm committed
uh-huh,
to it. It's
sure,
not so I can be nice to people. It's because it's safer for me because I get to dominant positions where I even have the option of disengaging if I need to and getting
yep,
away, or I have the
mm-hmm,
option of finishing where I'm at. And if you get me in a inferior position, you're going to have a hard time finishing me unless you train. So
yep,
I don't choose jujitsu because jujitsu is nicer, although it is. It is more camera appealing. It's because
right,
it's more effective. I'm going to win fights with
yep,
aggressive striking forms of martial arts or mixed martial or self-defense systems.
mm-hmm,
I don't think they're as effective. For me, second
mm-hmm,
place means death, maybe.
sure,
I could die. My friends have been killed. I've had friends who have been killed on the
yeah,
job. I've had uh,
mm-hmm,
I've had up to 20 guys that since I began my career. Some are
yeah,
car crashes,
uh-huh,
but I have 19 friends who have died since I started
wow,
working as a cop. So,
wow,
so I'm not doing jujitsu to be nice to the guy trying to hurt me. I'm doing
sure,
jujitsu to dominate him. But when I dominate him, it generally works out for both of us because he knows he's being dominated and he quits. How many times have you rolled with a newbie, a guy
yeah,
who looks great in his medium shirt? He does CrossFit.
sure,
He shows up at 10th Planet because he doesn't want to wear a
yeah,
gi and he wants to show
sure,
those muscles off. He steps on the
right,
mat and he sees you and you look like a normal, everyday, nice human. And then you
yep,
get top pressure on him and he quits. And you
sure,
just feel
yeah,
him wilt. You just
yep,
feel his will to resist go away.
mm-hmm,
Yeah. What do you
yeah,
think of that?
that's it. Yeah, that makes sense because yeah, people don't. The typical response is like, oh, I just see red, bro, and I'm gonna like whatever try to. They got 5 seconds of cardio in them, or 10 seconds tops, and then they start to not know what they're doing. Like if yeah, you get on, you take them down, get on top, and then they're like, what do I do from here? They have no idea, and they have no idea how to effectively apply whatever little amount of energy that they have. They're just kind of randomly moving.
In the context of self-defense and or LEO application, something you just said is really important, and that's the energy.
Sure.
When I connect to you physically with grappling, underhook, chest to chest, I've taken you down, I'm putting some weight on you. We're communicating very clearly to each other, and you can feel the guy underneath you, even when you're beating him. You can feel the guy underneath you who's still in the fight. He's still doing intelligent things. His elbows are tight. He's not letting you have underhooks. He's protecting the neck. He's cognitively thinking of how he needs to defend, even while he's in an inferior position. Contrast that with the newbie that you put there, and you put pressure on him, and to him the pressure is overwhelming, or her, and you can feel them quit. You can feel them second guess themselves. You can feel them hesitate. You can feel their energy change to where a second ago they were trying to push you over, but you shot your underhook, you knee tapped, now you're on top, you're passing to north-south, you're burying your head into their abdomen, and you're putting heavy pressure on that upper body, and you're digging an arm out, and you can feel that newbie begin to say, okay, I'm beat. That same thing happens with suspects. Now, sometimes I feel the inverse. I feel them double down, and now we're going to fight, but I'm already in a good position. So what that good position allows me is more reasonable force options if I do have to finish the fight. More reasonable force options. Now, I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning, because I think it's important for your listeners to know I'm not a jiu-jitsu practitioner or MMA or PJJ practitioner, because we have to mix in strikes, wrestling, weapons if we're talking about self-defense or law enforcement. But jiu-jitsu is a huge base there. I'm not an apologist for law enforcement use of force where I say, oh, well, we need to learn grappling so that we're being nice to this guy who's trying to beat me up or kill me. That's not my methodology. I am ethically and morally all bought into the idea that if I physically dominate other human beings, they will quit many times. And I'm okay with that, because I didn't want to fight in the first place. I wanted us to get along in the first place. But I can't control if this guy chooses to try to hurt me or fight me. I am sold at this point in my career on a mixed approach of wrestling, boxing primarily, maybe some limited kickboxing, and jiu-jitsu on the ground, and then adding weapons to that mix. I am sold on that as a superior form of self-defense, the superior form of LEO training. And I could take a guy like you, and I could train you in a very short amount of time on, hey, Mike, this is how you and I are going to go take that dude into custody. It would literally be very, very quick. Mike, I want you to establish knee on top. We're going to gift wrap him. We're going to roll him from his belly we're going to roll him from belly up to belly down. You could perform what I just said to do. You could do it right now.
Definitely.
And so what jiu-jitsu gives us is a skill set of controlled, dominant, physical behavior. I'm a huge fan of you. I'm a huge fan of Casey Halstead. Shout out to Coach Casey, because the jiu-jitsu where you train is position-based and pressure-based. Those two things win the encounter. When I positionally am dominant, I have options. One option is to stay there. Another option might be to improve my position. Another option might be to finish with some kind of finishing break or strangle. Another option might be to disengage and get off. You could get to such dominant positions that you could deploy a weapon system if you had to, whereas an inferior grappler might get caught up on bottom and then pull the weapon out. Now it's a struggle for the weapon from a bad spot. Now you made a bad spot worse. If I'm under somebody, my gun's staying in the holster. I don't want to introduce a gun into a fight I'm already losing. Hey,
sure, you're already on bottom.
You're already beating me, Mike. Here's a gun. What do you think of that? You know? But the untrained guy goes, well, if I get on bottom, the answer will be the gun. No, the answer is not the gun. The answer is to become better at not being on bottom, or to escape bottom, or to exist in that bottom space with a clear head, Smart. At this stage of my life, I'm approaching 55, and I know you personally. If you and I had an actual match, we shook hands, and it was jiu-jitsu, I would get submitted. I'm okay with that because right up to the moment you submitted me, I would be attempting to do the correct things. There's just a difference, and it's not just age. You're very good. I'm not trying to
Appreciate that.
appeal to the audience that, oh, if Chad was your age, I would be dominant on you. I'm not saying that. You're
Sure.
better than me.
Yeah.
Having said that,
All right.
though, I'm relevant. As we grapple, you would say there's respect that's still going to be exchanged because you're going to go, hey, I beat Chad, but it's a good roll and Chad's competent. That's what I want for police officers. Because once you're competent, even under pressure, under stress, under an elevated heart rate, you can start finding the proper routes to escape. If I started trying to attack you with a strangle of some sort, your immediate response would be counters to the strangle. Even if I got you, meaning you either went out or you tapped, while you were tapping, you'd be trying to escape.
Yep.
And that's the best I can hope for. Training
Sure.
training does not guarantee us wins. Training does not guarantee us losses. Those come and go. The only way to grow is to train and to struggle. So the struggle I go through in the room with guys like you does not mean I'm going to win. I might, who knows? The gods may call me home one day, and that is what it is. But if that happens, I'm going to die doing what I should be doing at the moment I'm dying, which is fighting. And so if I die, it's an honorable death. Like, and I'm not being like that's how I think. That's my mindset.
Right. Yeah.
And rounds with my brothers in the gym prepare me to have that heart and that mindset when it's real. And I've been there. I've had it be real before many times as a cop so far over the years.
Yeah.
And I've always responded in a way that my brothers would be proud. And so that's been important to me.
Yeah, definitely. And that it's interesting you started at Straight Blast Gym because I remember like when I first started jiu-jitsu, I watched this already old at the time like video like of aliveness from Matt Thornton, and he like describes like how jiu-jitsu is like you're actively resisting and like you're trying to do things against somebody who's trying to not let you do things. And I'm sure that was a big theme as you like came up training under
amazing. And then for me coaching, you've known me for a little while. While I'm not, I was never even at your level as a competitor. I did compete in the late 90s, early 2000s. Naga, I would have been a regular medaler all the way through my belt classes. I would medal at least at Naga. Not a significant threat for Worlds. And then certainly not an 80cc guy or anything like that in my day. However, as a coach, I am at that higher level, and I have coached at the highest levels professionally, and that's been a real blessing. That start that you just referenced with Matt and those guys, that was instrumental. From day one, I'm getting coached conceptually. I'm getting coached in a principle-based manner. I'm getting coached by people who understand aliveness. To this day, Matt Thornton and those early days at that gym influence how I run a class, how I coach, how I teach. To this day, I'm influenced by my early days at Straight Blast Gym. And Matt Thornton to this day is a friend. I'm actually a black belt under Michael Chapman, who was an SBG guy. He eventually kind of went his own way, and he runs Impact Jiu-Jitsu out of Oregon. And but I have fond memories of the SBG days. Those guys are phenomenal. I still follow Matt. I still talk to Matt about coaching points. He's very open to me. On great terms with the Impact guys. Dennis Davis, Rob Follis, all of us are through the same, we're all through the same tree. So, yeah, we all came up together.
Right. So yeah, that aliveness training is like that. That's what you're referencing, and what kind of gives you that confidence and that confidence and clear-headedness in like a live situation because you've been there before. Like you've been underneath guys in like terrible positions before, and you know how to get out. And you've done this over and over.
As recently as yesterday, and today I'm stuck in an airport. But if I'm not stuck in an airport, I train. I have a little rule for myself, and I call it the rule of three. And what the rule of three is in nature. So the reason I come up with rules is I've been doing this now since '98, and I'm in my 50s, and I have no plan on stopping. And motivation, I'm not motivated. I'm committed. Those are two different things. There's many days I'm not motivated to train, and I train anyway. And so I made this rule. And if you look in nature, if someone goes 3 minutes or longer without air, they begin to die. They lose 3 pints or more of blood, they begin to die. If you go out in the desert for 3 days, no shelter or water, you're going to die. And so I said in my head, if I have a 3-day period of my life I'm not training, I'm dying, proficiency-wise. So I don't have a 3-day period that I don't train. And training means resisting humans. It doesn't mean strength and conditioning. That's separate. So lifting, running, that is on you. That's your conditioning. That's not training. That's a key part of preparation. But training means I'm going to get up at 6 a.m., drive my happy butt down to 10th Planet, and I'm going to shake hands with Mike and the guys. We're going to go through some great instruction with Coach Casey, and then we're going to do some rounds, and we're going to have some struggle. Training means struggle with my brothers. Sometimes successful, many times not. Struggle is the only way to grow. I don't want to avoid it. I want to embrace it. In our world today, you and I are sitting in different locations, having a very relevant conversation on, I have a handheld computer. I'm soft. I'm in air-conditioned surroundings. I have to find hard things for me so that when I have a hard situation, I don't quit. And that could be in my relationship. That could be with my kids. That could be just in general. I can learn a lot from what you and I do on the mat. And it translates.
Yeah, definitely. It's a sharpening stone. Like Jordan, one of the other instructors at 10th Planet, he talks about how like when you sharpen knives, like you have a sharp knife against like a dull like stone or something like that, and then as you sharpen the sharp knife, like the dull stone gets sharper too. Like the iron sharpens iron. Like I believe that's a Bible verse. So it's like the sharpening stone eventually becomes a blade too. So like the upper belt that's like the hammer is hammering the nail. But it's in a weird way, the nail also becomes a hammer at some point.
1,000%. It's such a great analogy. And oftentimes police officers who are a little apprehensive of going to train will say to me, well, do they have just beginners? And I'll say, listen, what you need to do is if you come and train with me and you come to my class, by the way, a foundations class could be okay because then it gets terminology out of the way and positions and things like that. I'm actually a fan of some kind of foundations curriculum where they at least learn what the different positions are so that if coach is leading a block, he doesn't have to coach, well, this is what a half guard is. But outside of foundations and outside of this is pure competition class, I think that middle range is exactly what you're talking about. You need the sharp blade in the room, and then you want the newbies to have some rounds with that person so that process occurs. I often tell the new people, I'll handpick who they roll with if they're new to my class, and I'll handpick upper belts. I'll say, and I'll rotate my upper belts with the new person and with each other, so they're still getting training value where they get to go hard with each other, but then I'm putting them with the newer person. And oftentimes the newer person will look, if it's a gi class, they'll look at that belt. They'll become all intimidated off the get-go. And I'll go, listen, the worst thing I could do is give you to that other guy over there who's nervous too, and neither one of you know what's going to hurt each other, how fast is too fast, how hard is too hard. The best thing I could do for you as an instructor is to give you this brown belt. And then learn from it and accept it and accept that sharpening like you're talking about. Accept that sharpening. Don't run from it. Don't think it's wrong. accept it.
Yep.
And that's such a good analogy. I couldn't agree more. And I look for that all the time too. Like like
Yeah,
like
definitely.
here I am 2+ decades into my training, and I'm looking for that sharp knife in the room to smooth
Yep.
me out, to work on
Yep.
me. We have
Exactly.
a tradition at my training classes for law enforcement. A certification class is 4 days, and they are 8 to 9 hour days every day, and we're
Oh
training,
wow.
right? So we're
Yeah.
teaching a
Right.
block, we're teaching principles, we're teaching concepts, we're coming up with drills to drill those concepts, and then we're coming up with
Mm-hmm.
more live drills. But at lunch,
Mm-hmm.
I put this out before the course, and then I put it out on day one on. I tell everybody in the class, I say, at lunch, I'm not leaving. I brought food, I'm going to graze, I'm going to eat some nuts, I'm going to eat some yogurt, get a little bit in my system, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to roll. For 40
Oh
minutes of
wow.
lunch, I'm going to roll. And it's going to
Yeah.
be open
In
roll.
a 9 hour day
Yep.
already. Yeah.
Yep. And it's going to
In
be,
the middle of a 9 hour day.
and it's
That's
going to
crazy.
be open rolls, and we're just going to
Yep.
set the round timer and go guy to guy to guy. And this is an opportunity,
Yep.
A, if you train, to be able to train with dudes you'd never get to. B, we're doing a little bit extra. This is a standard. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
go a little bit above the standard. And C, if you've
Mm-hmm.
never done it and you've always wanted to do it, this is a super safe environment because we're all cops, and those of us who are training, we want the other cops. If you meet a cop who's a black belt, that guy wants other cops to train more than anyone on the planet. That dude wants his
Yep.
backup to be trained. He understands the benefit to himself. We're the loudest
Mm-hmm.
cheerleaders for this crap. So
Sure.
so I'll get these guys to stick around and roll, and in that roll, I will make sure I'm rolling with my other instructors and my other upper belts. Even though we're having long days,
Mm-hmm.
I'll call my guys out. Hey, get over here. Get on. Let's go. Get over here. Let's go. And I'll be shaking hands and rolling with the toughest dudes in the room to lead the way. I don't. I
Mm-hmm.
don't expect my students to do anything that I won't do. And
Sure.
I'm never the best guy in the room. I'm in tough rooms. I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
I'm in rooms where I'm
Yeah.
never the
Definitely.
best guy, but it's been a benefit. Can I tell you one more benefit for cops
That's
or
good.
LEOs if they're listening?
Sure.
One of the other huge benefits, you've known me for some time now, and
Yeah.
here I am, a
Mm-hmm.
20+ year police officer. I'm still in shape, so the physical
Mm-hmm.
conditioning of grappling regularly just can't even be denied. My
Oh
cardiovascular
yeah.
difference, my physical difference.
Yep.
I fit in the
Mm-hmm.
same uniform as when I started, and in fact, it's a little smaller because I was powerlifting when I started, because I thought that's how you
Oh
win
wow.
fights. You know, I was lifting heavy.
Yeah. Right.
I no longer do
Uh huh.
that. So I've got the physical
Yeah.
benefit. A secondary benefit, though,
Yep.
Mike, that's really important is the emotional, and dare I say, depending on how people feel, even a spiritual component of the
Mm-hmm.
job is bad for your soul. Um, you're going to see
Sure.
things you shouldn't see. I've done things to people at work that I would never do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wouldn't even think of, I've done things to
Sure.
people, had to.
Yeah.
I've had
Yeah.
events where people were alive and then they weren't alive
Mm-hmm.
anymore by the end of the event. That's never happened in my
Sure.
private life, you know. That's not
Yeah.
happening
Yeah.
at the
Of course.
gym.
Yeah. You're.
But I'm human.
Yeah. You're.
And being able
Mm-hmm.
to go to the gym and work out those demons with you and the guys, I can't tell you. One of the reasons I jumped at coming on your podcast is guys like you have been a
Mm-hmm.
godsend for me. And I know you and I don't actually get to train regularly, but we do train some.
Sure.
My
Yep.
primary gyms are other gyms, but I'm welcome at 10th Planet. You guys just open your arms to me. Anytime I come, everybody is so welcoming. That
Oh yeah.
that for a cop in today's society where we're not always accepted, that
Mm-hmm.
acceptance is good for me
Mm-hmm.
to also remember that there are so many good people in the world that are not cops. And it helps put
Sure.
humanity on me as a police officer,
Mm-hmm.
and it puts
Mm-hmm.
humanity on my community. So the community features of rolling in a jiu-jitsu gym are very healthy for LEO. The
Right.
physical features are undeniable. I mean, I'm fit and in shape. We have to do an annual physical at Vegas Metro,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
we do a stress test on a treadmill where they take your blood
Oh wow.
pressure and then
Mm-hmm.
you run, and then they take it and they measure your recovery and how your blood pressure holds up while you're exercising. Every time now they know me because I'm 20 plus. I'm a 20-year veteran. But they always tell me the guys who grapple test out the highest on every metric, on being in shape. The nurses who do our physicals every year at Metro tell us by our blood pressure, by our blood work, and by our stress test, they always know the guys who do grappling and the guys who don't. Even powerlifting does not give you good measures. If you think about what they're measuring, like I could go to the gym and have a 370-pound bench and weigh 210 at my height and be muscle bound, and I'm not going to score like I score as a 180-pound physically fit grappler MMA guy. I score off the charts for my age.
Sure.
And
yeah, definitely there's that, the cardiovascular component.
It's a small subset. It's not scientific. It's not big enough to be scientific. But the people who administer that testing to my department say that there is a marked difference in blood pressure, in recovering from fitness, and in they put us on the treadmill. They have to work us longer than the other guys to get our heart rate up.
Sure.
And then we recover way faster. We recover like 4 times faster. Because then they have you step off the treadmill and they start taking your BP. What they're trying to measure, and I don't know that I think it's a poor man's way to do this, but they're trying to measure our heart's ability to output and then to recover. We crush it. And they tell me all the grapplers crush it. They literally know when they can administer the test blindly and look at the results and go, that guy trains. And nothing else gives them that result. So that's pretty cool as well. Yeah. But the emotional and the spiritual parts of getting the stress release, I'm also active in my own faith. I actually feel like the jiu-jitsu mat is the purest place on earth. There's less judgment. They don't care what political party you are. No one cares what gender you are. No one cares what you're into. It's all about being there for that united purpose of struggle, strife, and getting better on the mats. And there's a purity to that actually is not anywhere else in my life.
For sure. Yeah, no, I definitely feel it's a there is sort of like a religious aspect to it. It's a thing you show up to every day, and it's like the same time, the same place with all the same people, and like we go through the same like structure of a class, and it's like a ritual kind of thing where like we clap onto like there's like certain little things where it's like community building, and we all kind of like feel like we're all on the same team. We're all a part of something.
And here's where it's unique too. And once again, I want to be very clear for me personally.
Sure.
I do have some specific religious beliefs that are not jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is not a religion to me. However, having said that, the only people who really don't work out in jiu-jitsu are the people who remove themselves. We don't expel people very often. Now, you could get expelled for extreme behavior, but often we correct behavior. We have people who might act out in different ways on the mat, and we correct that. But that's what I mean by that. That jiu-jitsu environment, when you find brothers who love jiu-jitsu, you're united. Like, we're brothers. Like we may have different interests. We may have different faith. That's the beauty of it. Like, I'm super active in my faith. I know you're not. We still love each other. We still appreciate the things about each other, and we still know this. We know this respectable element about one another. When I think of you, I know of several things I respect right off the bat. When your name and your face comes up, and it's all based off of our being able to go through struggle together in a united purpose. And I think that is very healthy for a law enforcement officer. I mentioned earlier that I've got about 20 friends who have been either hurt in accidents, one training accident, a guy got killed. The other were vehicle accidents. One guy was a Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt, ironically, and he fell out of the helicopter doing a rescue. So he perished. And then all the other guys that have been murdered, and there's been about 20 of them. Well, I also have about 20 guys who have killed themselves over the years, if not more. And even if you think Rob Follis, Tim
Mm-hmm.
Lane, who was a coach at Xtreme Couture. These guys ended up
Mm-hmm.
taking their own lives. But in the law enforcement side, I have almost as many friends. Uh, in fact, I'm thinking in my head real quick. I have
Sure.
more friends who have taken their own lives than have been killed by a suspect. Um,
Wow.
I believe that um, while jiu-jitsu is not the only healthy outlet for law enforcement, I believe it is
Sure.
a vital that you find a healthy outlet, and I can
Yep.
ascertain or assert that
Mm-hmm.
jiu-jitsu could be that healthy outlet for that cop out there to work
Right.
off the stress. Man, I can be burdened by the memory of a kid who drowned, or maybe I'm involved. I've been involved in events where I had bad dreams afterwards, where where
Yeah.
where it was perfectly justified what we had to do, but I'm
Sure.
still a human being, and
Yeah.
and those things dissipate and fade away as I train,
Mm-hmm.
and I could go to the gym. I could show up at 6 in the morning with some heavy burdens on my shoulders, get on the mat, go through warm up, start to loosen up,
Mm-hmm.
get technique. Casey's leading us through. I get into the technique. Suddenly the burden melts away. And then
Yeah.
suddenly I'm rolling with Richie. I'm rolling with you. I'm rolling with the guys. I'm taking around with Case. I'm in
Yep.
there rolling. And by that time, I don't even know that there's a burden. Like it's gone
Sure.
for that
Yep.
period of time. And there's
Yep.
something pure about that that allows me to place in perspective this heavy, heavy thing that was weighing down my soul, whatever it is. And then I
Right.
stepped
Right.
on that mat, and my brothers helped lift me through struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a
Mm-hmm.
pureness to that I can't
Yeah.
recreate other places. So there's a
Sure.
purity to that that I think is very important for those out there who might be considering
Yeah.
jujitsu as a workout.
Definitely. Because yeah, you guys like for police officers, you don't encounter people having a good
No,
day. Like like people don't call you because they're having too good of a time.
no.
Like you're seeing yeah, like everyone on their at their worst and just everyone's having like a terrible time and like you see like yeah terrible things and have to experience like more than what the average human is ever going to experience.
And and, and
So
I wouldn't say the soldiers who go on in harm's way on our behalf. Those guys have my
sure,
eternal thanks and
yeah,
complete
yeah,
respect. But even that,
mm-hmm,
if I get deployed, I come home for a period of time, and then I get deployed and I come
mm-hmm,
home. And when I get
yeah,
deployed, it's for a specific mission, and many times
mm-hmm,
not even in my own community. But I am protecting my
sure,
community. I have nothing. This is not meant to diminish those sacrifices made by those people and their families. It's too vast for
sure,
me to thank them appropriately. For a police
yeah,
officer, though, my tour starts every Monday, and it never
yeah,
ends. And it's in my own
sure,
community, and it's
yeah,
amongst my people of
yeah,
my city, and
sure,
that's not to cry a river or whatever, but that's a reality. That's
yeah,
a reality. And
yeah,
so
mm-hmm,
my thing is not to say woe is us. My thing is to warn those who are listening who want to do my line of work. You need to find a
mm-hmm,
healthy outlet so that
yeah,
you're the right kind of person for the community and you don't get poisoned. And now you shouldn't be there. And there's
sure,
cops like that. We draw from the same
mm-hmm,
pool. We hire from the same pool that we police. So we have cops
sure,
that
yeah,
that make it through, or we have cops that
yeah,
change for a reason.
yeah. I think you got muted, maybe. Okay, all right, now you're back.
Okay, yeah, someone's trying to call through. So for
Okay,
cops, you have these stressors they're just a reality, and to
mm-hmm,
find a good way to deal with them is really important.
gotcha, yeah, definitely, and that's the Um, and yeah, even for us normal people with 9 to 5 jobs and like not
100%.
having it is like it's a huge yeah stress relief. I've never regretted going to training. Like
Nope.
you never. I don't think anybody has ever regretted like going to jujitsu instead of whatever. Like unless they miss like something important or whatever, then that's a little bit like not that's not good. But like if it's your normal training time, like you should just be going, and it's just because it's your daily feel good, um, stress relief, release the endorphins kind of thing. And it's a good habit to be in. Like I go to 6 a.m. every day, Monday through Friday. Like
Yep.
that is just my sleep cycle is acclimated to that. So yeah, that's definitely for especially for Leos who like have this extra the extra need to like have an outlet to get relieve some of these burdens. So anyways, that's cool. What's like the biggest impediment? Like I know police jiu-jitsu is growing and there's more and more cops who train. What's like the biggest resistance that you've seen?
Initially, it was just that I believe grappling and jiu-jitsu is not that old here in America, and so I'm 50. I'll be 55 this year. I'm actually older than BJJ has been in the U.S.
Sure.
So what I felt like the early biggest impediments were the people who make decisions on what we train and how we train and who ultimately sign the dollars for that, sign the checks. In the early 2000s, none of those guys were jiu-jitsu guys. They might have a karate background. They might have an aikido background. I had aikido sprinkled in. They have a Krav background. A lot of the training is these other traditional arts based or boxing or aikido.
Yeah.
And so there was some pushback initially from that end. And then, like you said, they don't even know. Then you have guys who don't really believe in the martial arts at all in these leadership positions, and they think it's just another karate or martial art or goofy made-up thing.
Yeah.
So there was some pushback from a lack of knowledge in the early days. Now, fast forward, why are we having a now is different than ever before. I'm telling you that right now as a guy who's been trying to do this and trying to make it change for 2 decades. Now it's picking up steam.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is the George Floyd event was interesting to me because you have an event where my fear was initially he's basically kneeling on that guy. They're going to try to blame like pressure, like jiu-jitsu type applications and say, I was happy that didn't happen. And I think what everyone saw with that event was an officer who did not have care for another human who was in medical distress.
Sure.
He did not act with compassion. He was not taking care. I'm going to circle back to that, why jiu-jitsu also helps with that. But the exact opposite has happened. What's happened is there's more of a movement currently to physically train officers. I think people in their minds think that police officers train on a regular basis as part of the job. Once you graduate the academy, for Vegas Metro, they require quarterly training. So that's once a quarter, so that's 4 times a year.
Yeah.
And then they have another day added to that you might get some hands-on training. So that's 5 times a year you might touch each other in training. 5 times a year. You're going to touch a dude in training 5 times this week.
Yep.
So you and I both know that consistency over time gives you the result.
Yep.
But if I consistently don't train over time, I still get a result. Right. And the result is I'm less proficient, quite possibly, than I was when I graduated the academy, not getting more proficient. Sure. So in law enforcement, the old way was, well, I'm a 17-year veteran. I'm far more proficient. Well, that's 17 years of not training. Because many departments only require an annual DT session.
Oh, wow.
So that's once a year. Yeah. Some departments have no DT requirement, meaning hands-on training.
Right.
NYPD, which is one of the biggest police departments in the world, does not have a DT program. Wow. If I graduated the academy with NYPD, I would never do DT training again.
That's crazy.
So I could be 23 years on. Now, I am getting actual experience grabbing guys, and that has value. Sure. That has value.
Yeah. Yep.
But here's the problem with practice. Practice does not make perfect Perfect practice doesn't exist, so perfect practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent.
Yep.
So if I permanently don't train on a regular basis, the result, because remember, C, consistency, over T, over time, equals R, result. C over T equals R.
Yep.
If I consistently over time don't train, the result is I'm not proficient. There's no way to be proficient. There's no way for Mike to stay Mike if you decided, okay, I'm going to train in January, I'm going to train again in June,
Right.
I'm going to train again in September, and then I'll throw in a December training as well. And I'm going to stay right where I am.
Yeah.
Like you're laughing out loud. Well, that's the police world traditionally.
Uh-huh.
So as politicians and as society has begun to demand more of law enforcement, which I'm actually okay with, but don't do it out of both sides of your mouth. If you want a more proficient officer, you can't pass a law that orders me to be proficient and then not give me opportunities to train on a regular basis to be proficient. And so the push now, the big change, going back to your question, is twofold. Number one is politicians and administrators are finally beginning, I believe, to accept that you cannot be proficient by training annually.
Sure.
That's a check mark. That's a check the box type system. Oh, we trained this guy. No, you did not.
Yep.
And I believe the courts are starting to say that's not training. We demand more. I believe society is beginning to say we demand more. So good on you guys because it's coming into my industry. The second thing that's happening is go back to my earlier statement. In the early days, you didn't have any brass. Nobody who was the only guys who knew anything about jiu-jitsu were new guys. Well, now, 20 years later, you have chiefs who are blue belts. You have chiefs who are black belts occasionally. You have chiefs who are purple belts. You have commanders, which is another rank, who might be a purple belt. Now, through our rank structure on a department, you're going to have cops who train, and you're going to have cops of various belts. Maybe one in narcotics, maybe one in SWAT, maybe three in the dope or the gang unit. So, a number of in patrol. So I'm seeing that change. So familiarity. And then the third thing is law enforcement is a results-oriented business. You and I could theorize what would be a good way to take someone into custody all day long, but eventually we got to go grab that person. And it either is good or it's not good. And wrestling, jiu-jitsu, PJJ, a system of a mixed approach of control first, then strikes or finishing. That formula is effective. It works. And it's getting demonstrated again and again. There are several studies now, if people care to look, where departments have done studies after they've implemented a grappling-based, control-based system of DTs, where they've had positive results in injury to officer, injury to suspect, and effectiveness of the reason injuries are down is they're more effective, which goes back to my very earlier statement way at the beginning of this thing that I don't prefer boxing or Krav because I'm never getting to a control position. I'm just using aggression to try to overwhelm you. Well, if I know Mike, I know you personally. I know your character and your heart. I'm not confident I could just punch you and you would just decide you don't want to fight anymore. You would defend yourself. Even if I began to hurt you, diminish you, you would fight through it. You're used to that. And so I need to work for control and dominance, and that leads to better outcomes. So I think that's the next reason why we're seeing a resurgence or a push for grappling and law enforcement, and it's better than ever. It's growing.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's great to hear because it leads to better outcomes for everyone. Like it's a win. It's a win-win for everyone. Like more officers are not as injured, and like suspects aren't getting as injured either, and they don't have to have weapons or like officers like you don't have to like immediately go to like lethal force or whatever. Like you have a spectrum to go up to whatever different levels of force. Like you can use a I understand you're using it for you're interested in training it for the officers, like so they can go home and like that's the that's the like officer safety is number one for you. But yeah, the rest of the community can like see like you said, it's video friendly. Like it's not going to an officer controlling a suspect isn't like beating on them with a baton, or that's not gonna that's not gonna be one more thing that's negative press for police.
So here's the symbiotic win that happens.
Yeah.
The reason that and I can speak personally about me over the years, and the reason I have very few strikes or using my baton or using my pepper spray or whatever is because I'm winning at a lower level, which means I'm safe, and when I'm safe, he's safe.
Yep.
And so I'm okay with that relationship. What I frown upon is jiu-jitsu guys who show a video of a cop struggling in the street and then go, oh, jiu-jitsu is the answer, and they're not even going to go down range and do that guy's job. My thing, or people who say, man, the cops should just be nice to that guy and not have to hit him or whatever. If you were to do a self-defense application of jiu-jitsu tomorrow, someone approached you and a loved one, and they were aggressive and angry, and they tried to strike your loved one, and you took them down, you wouldn't be thinking about, let me see how nice and gentle I can control this guy. What you would do is physically dominate him, so that if you needed to Donkey Kong him, you were in a position to Donkey Kong him. And then if he gave up because you're a man of good character, you would allow, even with offense, for you to control your emotions, which is another important part about training. Even though you would be angry and irritated and determined to protect your young one, your loved one, you would still behave in a controlled manner based on training. Violence for you is not emotional. It's not based on emotion. I'm scared, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, now I'm going to act out in violence. Violence for you is a tool that's been sharpened, in our earlier reference, by other people in the room. And so now when it's time for me to be violent, I'm violent. But it's because it's time. It's because the other guy is demanding it, not me. I'm not resorting to violence because I'm emotional and I can't control myself. I'm resorting to it because the other guy is ordering it, and I don't have another thing that I can do, and so I'm applying it. But when I apply it in a dominant position-based manner, many times it allows, I can use, here's another thing that's important for you in self-defense or for me as a cop, and for the community in general. I can use physical force in a grappling context as a de-escalation tool to avoid further violence. Whereas if I didn't have a deep grappling segment, I would use my presence as an officer. I'd use a verbal command, which gets ignored or rejected. I would use an ineffective grab, which I don't know how to control someone. They would easily resist that. And now we're up into upper levels of force because I'm unsafe. Now I'm unsafe ultimately by that guy. He should not be fighting with me or anyone else. You and I don't get in fights. Someone today at the airport here may get mad at me about where we're standing in line. We're not going to get in a fist fight over where we're standing in line. I know, because I'm going to refuse to fight over where we're standing in line. Now, if because the other person can't control their emotions and they decide where we're standing in line is worth hurting me, now we are going to get into a confrontation. But if during that confrontation I can control them with dominant position, and they're so dominated that then they change their mind and go back to, holy crap, this was a horrible idea. I picked the wrong bald old guy. I want to pick someone else. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, then I'm going to back right back down to, hey, man, I never wanted to fight in the first place. We're good. Like,
it's a de-escalation tactic.
It's a de-escalation tactic through physical force because you and I can effectively use force. And at the end of the day, let's look at this holistically. Let's say you had a guy who you had to protect a loved one. You get to a dominant position. You're trying to calm him down, and they start trying to bite or claw you or hit you in the groin. You might have to finish with a strangle and put them unconscious. Or maybe they start trying to get a hammer out of their pants pocket, and you're already in a physical, so you sink in a strangle and finish that and remove the hammer and throw it across the store under an aisle and hold him down and just kind of pin him and talk to him, let him come back. You're gonna dominate that physically. You're gonna control it, but you're not gonna use striking to do that. Whereas, let's say you did decide he starts going after the hammer. You hit him a couple times, but it doesn't render him unconscious. He gets all the way back up to his feet. Now he has a hammer in his hands. You have empty fists, and now you're exchanging hammer blows for punches. That's a losing comp. So my approach is not. I often see, oh look, the cop didn't even have to punch this guy. He's trying to punch everyone else. You know, I kind of think that guy shouldn't be punching everyone else. I kind of think, shame on him.
Sure.
But if the officer is so physically dominant that he doesn't need to punch, well, then that's a win too. So I'm good with that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's kind of my perspective.
For sure. Yeah. And that's like you. I think we touched on earlier is like we're mentally like it's turning them from like getting in such a dominant position where they don't want to fight anymore. Where it's like they exert their 10 seconds of cardio and they're like, oh, they realize they're in deep waters and this is like not the right decision that they just made. So yeah, that's definitely definitely makes sense. And I since we're in Vegas, like have you had like a good role in the street? Like has somebody trained jiu-jitsu and you've like they've responded in like an intelligent jiu-jitsu way?
Yeah, actually on 3 occasions. On 2 of them, I still was able to de-escalate by being on top and staying in dominant position and talking to the guy. But the other guy was an all-out fight, and I had to resort to strikes because he was counter-grappling me. He had wrestled. It turned out he had been a Marine. He had been a Marine Corps combative. He was a younger guy. He was on leave. He was drunk. He got trespassed from a club. I got him to leave the club. The club wanted him arrested. I initially got him to agree to leave. The club let him leave. He then came back and attacked one of the club bouncers. We got called back over there. Then he attacked me and my partner. And he had been a 3-time CIF South Division qualifier and then a 1-time CIF champion, according to him. And when he went with me, it was evident that he had grappling acumen. And he was countering all my efforts to. I was trying to do upper body like body lock to trips. I was trying to do underhooks, snap down, that kind of thing, and he was easily going through those. He shot a double. I sprawled. He started to reshoot. I separated. He came in low again though with his head down, and I was able to knee him. And with him, I had to resort to strikes. To stun him, I had to resort to follow-up strikes and then a dominant top position to handcuff him. And then once we got done with the whole fiasco, unfortunately, I had to take a military veteran to jail. I asked him, and he said, yeah, I have significant wrestling. And he was apologetic, and he's just too drunk. He got a misdemeanor disturbance charge, and I think the military probably treat him harsher than the courts in Vegas. But those are, that guy specifically, that turned into a Donnybrook. There was one other guy who didn't have jits or street training, but, well, actually 2. There was a day when we could do carotid restraint, and I had a guy who had a large fixed blade in his waistband, and while struggling with us, he got his hand on it, and we were able to do carotid restraint at the time. We had to do what was called LVNR, which is basically a Dan Severn short choke. Not a completed RNC. So I've got a gable grip with my hands back near the ear. I was able to finish that department approved carotid restraint, and he went unconscious. We handcuffed him, and we were able to take his hand off the knife. And then one other guy actually went for a handgun while I was knee on belly, and got his hands on the handgun. And that guy I had to strike as well. And that guy went unconscious, and then we rolled him over. But I beat him with grappling positioning, which from that dominant grappling positioning, I was able to deliver strikes. Interestingly enough, I had a partner on the call where the guy's trying to get the gun. My partner was a big guy, lifted weights, but he didn't have any grappling acumen. And we got into an extended struggle with this guy trying to handcuff him, kind of almost like a scramble, if you will, at the gym.
Sure.
My partner would actually knock me out.
Oh, I think you might have got. Okay, yeah, there.
I'm back.
Gotcha.
My
Okay,
partner
okay.
actually knocked me out of dominant positions because he doesn't understand grappling during the fight and would let the guy back into the
Yeah.
fight. My partner also tried to strike this guy from 2 knees on the ground beside him at some point, and those were ineffective strikes. So through a
Sure.
grappling delivery system of knee on top, where I eventually
Mm-hmm.
secured his pants and pulled up, and I secured behind his head and was pulling up with a knee on belly,
Mm-hmm.
I ceased his
Mm-hmm.
movement, and he stopped going all over. Then he went after the handgun, which I then noticed because I'm kneeling. He's trying to reach through my
Yeah.
knee to get to the gun. I realize the gun's there, and I'm kneeling almost on it.
Yeah.
And I was able to deliver strikes. It rendered him unconscious briefly. We rolled him over, we cuffed him, rolled him back over, recovered the firearm. So that was another very specific grappling event where through
Yeah.
grappling, I was able to maintain dominant position and then ultimately dominate my adversary. Now, people could say, "Oh, good, you didn't have to shoot him," and I do agree with that because I don't want to hurt anybody. But at that point, he's trying to kill
Sure.
me. Like he
Sure.
did
Yeah.
benefit though. He benefited from my training,
Right.
and I'm glad. My soul's happy with that. But but
Sure.
but I didn't like consciously go, "Oh, I know jujitsu. He has a gun. I'm just going
Right.
to jujitsu
Yeah.
him to be nice to him." But the beauty of it
Right.
is
No.
jujitsu and grappling hard rounds with dudes like you gave me the skill
Mm-hmm.
set to deliver an
Right.
effective use of force, which ultimately saved
Mm-hmm.
lives. And who
Sure.
knows if we get into a run, like I'm running for my gun, he's running for his gun, who knows if we both don't get
Mm-hmm.
rounds on, you know? And
Right.
now I get shot,
Exactly.
even though,
Yeah.
so I'm certain that jujitsu saved me first, and then ultimately it
Yeah.
saved him, and I'm okay with that exchange.
Sure. Sure. Exactly. Definitely makes
Yep.
sense. You got into the carotid when you were allowed to use carotid restraint versus not. So that's a matter of like policy, like law.
So
Um,
it's a matter of law at this
yeah.
point for the state of Nevada.
Uh huh.
Each state is
Uh
different.
huh.
Um,
I
in
see.
the past, carotid restraint would be generally, most of the time, be controlled by policy, and departments would say
Uh huh.
only under these threat conditions could you do a carotid restraint. And then at times, like
Mm-hmm.
my department, when they allowed it, they would say only this form of carotid restraint. There was still a lot of
I see.
misunderstanding and misinformation
Sure.
about carotid restraint, as though it's not a
Right.
safe general application. Now, I will say this,
Sure.
Mike. When we're doing carotid restraint to each other, nobody's typically on meth or on fentanyl. So I'm
Right.
not certain that a carotid restraint to a person high on fentanyl is the best thing for that person. But I would also
Sure.
make the argument, I would concede that argument because some people make that argument
Mm.
that, well, as a
Yeah.
cop, this guy's high on meth or fentanyl. But then my co-argument would be the real danger is heart issues because they're taking a stimulant. And so if you
Sure.
don't allow me to apply a carotid restraint out of being nice to them, being kind,
Yeah.
then you're going to make
Uh
him
huh.
fight me under an elevated heart
Sure.
rate. So now it's going to
Yeah.
take a beating for me to subdue him, and it's going to take
Yeah.
an extended amount of him redlining, if that makes sense to you. So now I've got a guy who
Exactly. Yeah.
potentially has a medical condition, he potentially has a
Mm-hmm.
heart issue, and your answer to
Mm-hmm.
me is, I want you to be nice to him and not choke him because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's mean. So now you're going to have
Mm-hmm.
to beat him into submission, which could take,
Sure.
a minute, minute and a half,
Right.
and then
Exactly.
handcuff him
Takes more
and
damage. Yeah.
potentially
Yeah.
damage him as opposed to a carotid
Yeah.
restraint. It's wildly
Yeah.
misunderstood. It is a
Yeah.
tragedy, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
that I can't apply carotid restraint due to political movements and due to a lack
Mm-hmm.
of pure ignorance as to carotid restraint
Sure.
and the dangers. Now, I will concede
Sure.
once again that I can't measure the scientific or medical effect of being high on fentanyl and then experiencing carotid restraint.
Sure.
But you also can't be high on fentanyl and run a marathon. You
The
also couldn't be high on
yeah.
fentanyl and do a CrossFit water of the day. You also shouldn't be high
Uh
on
huh.
fentanyl at all
Right.
rested.
And wanting to fight people, right? Like that it's two bad
Too bad
options,
off.
and like you're trying to protect yourself, and by protecting yourself, you're ultimately protecting them through like this more effective use of force. But yeah, because it looks bad, because
Yeah.
like it's
Also, like
regulated.
ethically and morally, I want to do as little harm to my fellow man as possible. Even my fellow man who's
Sure.
off the rails, even my fellow
Sure.
man who's a criminal, ethically and morally, I want to do I want to be as dominant as possible, so that I'm safe and the community's safe. After that, after that goal, I want to be as ethical and as moral as possible. And I feel like these well-meaning laws, where we say, "Oh, no more choking people," well, that well-meaning law, I believe, is you're taking an option away from me, and I don't appreciate the fact that now you're making me beat that guy. And now
Right.
I believe we're going to have worse outcomes. I believe it will lead to more death. You're certainly not going to save lives by punching a dude in medical distress and fighting him.
Yeah.
It's
No,
it's it's
exactly.
it's hilarious to a guy like you and I. Also, those guys can have high pain thresholds, and one of the issues with that is now all of my empty hand tactics fail, and now I am using weapons on this same guy because you took a very valuable empty hand tactic away from me, meaning not you, but a lawmaker or the courts
Right.
or the department
Yep.
takes that away from me. Well, now you are forcing me to elevate my force option choice against my will, by the way, because I want to be ethical and moral in my application of force. And you are making me cause injury to my fellow man, and I don't appreciate it. It actually bothers me that the uninformed make these decisions,
Yeah.
and that's who makes them. Are there people who die in law enforcement events where control tactics are used? That is true. That happens every year, and that's going to continue to happen. And that happened before you and I were born. It'll happen after I die. That's not a reason to take away an effective low-level force option,
Right.
which now you're forcing me to use. I have to fill that vacuum. There's a void you're creating by saying no more carotid restraint. Well, now that gets filled with a fist to the face, or a pepper spray, or a baton, or but it has to get filled. So it's ridiculous. So now, having said all that, in today's climate, I'm not an advocate for police officers to get that back, because if I applied a carotid restraint 1,000% correctly to you, or not to you, to a suspect, he was high on fentanyl and he did die, they would literally say it's because of the carotid restraint, and they would try to indict me.
Sure.
So, in the political and legal environment we live in, I don't even use carotid restraint for self-defense. Because if you did carotid restraint in a parking lot at Smith's, and that person dies, they're going to indict you.
Yeah.
So I'll use punches. I'll hold them down. I'll rub their face in the ground and tell them to stop.
Right.
Because I'm not going to be nice to the other guy and then have that flipped around on me on the back end. And them say, hey, you were defending yourself, but we think it's bad. You choked him. We think that killed him. Well, no, fentanyl and a heart attack killed him. Well, so I don't use carotid restraint as a self-defense measure. I believe it is unsafe for the applier. I believe you're fully capable of doing carotid restraint. I believe if you carotid restraint someone tomorrow in a parking lot in self-defense, I believe they'll try to indict you.
I see. Yeah, because the laws are slow to catch up to like what we know as like basically science, like fight science. Like we know this is like what is effective, what isn't, and it's just we don't have lawmakers who are purple belts in jiu-jitsu and understand these things. So.
Now I will say one of the science we don't understand is one of the reasons they drug test for MMA. When they test for for drugs, narcotics, they're not testing for enhancers. They're testing to see if you pop hot for meth because they don't want you to fight. So I will admit that we do not know the consequence of a high dose of fentanyl, and then a carotid restraint. We don't know that because we ethically can't even test that. We can't give people fentanyl and then choke them.
Right.
Science won't allow us to do it. We can try to recreate it,
right.
and they have, by the way, they have done these studies where they've elevated people's heart rates, which mimics fentanyl or a stimulant, and then done stuff like choked them or put weight on them. And what they found is that people without those substances do fine. They have the normal reaction. So the only caveat I would make to all this is that I don't know how safe carotid restraint is for the meth head who's high, but I also know that fighting's not safe. So what are we doing?
Exactly.
And if it's a medical problem, medical will not treat him until he's in custody. So even if you want to make an argument, like let's say someone's pro banning carotid restraint for safety of the bad guy, and they're pro on the angle that, well, Chad, you don't scientifically know if fentanyl induces more death than carotid restraint. I will stipulate that that's true as a critical thinking man who's a professional in my arena. But I would counter argue back. You also, we also know that that's a medical problem, and the longer he doesn't get medical, the more likely he is to die. And when you make me fight him, you take a 7 to 10 second exchange and you turn it into a minute and a half because I got to overcome the resistance of a grown man. And then back to your relevant point earlier, who now maybe they have other injuries like maybe a nose injury or because we've had to fight each other. So now this dude's hurt and he's on fentanyl and his heart rate's up and he redlined for 7 minutes, and now we can't save him on the back end because you wanted to be so nice to him when I could have put him out in 7 seconds, handcuffed him, got medical, code 3 to him, and medical's there much quicker treating him. So I think we can make, those of us, we can make that intelligent argument on our behalf.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, it's good that I'm super glad that you're out there. You are you're in the field. You are training all kinds of however many 50 departments and 50 affiliates and however many thousands of officers
buddy.
under that. Right. That's amazing. So I appreciate you coming on today, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. You're making a big impact in this.
I'm very grateful for my opportunities, and I'm thankful for you, brother. Thank you for bringing me on, and we'll shake hands soon and go through. We'll go through the fire, buddy.
Exactly. Sounds good. All right.
Appreciate you, brother. Be safe. Bye bye.
All right. Thank you. You too. Bye.